middleman communication. They receive the information from the other device. They look at it, see what they want to see, and then they pass it on to the next device as if like they were never there. And
Exactly.
pretty much the person like sends it, the person receiving it, like they never know the guy in the middle is receiving and then forwarding information after he gets what he needs, pretty much.
Exactly. That's typically what a man in the middle attack is. You got a middleman that's no, I can't hear you, Fred. You're muted right now. I'm not sure if you had a question, but can anybody else hear Fred?
No, I can't hear him.
Okay, I think he's gonna rejoin. Um, but the man in the middle attack is exactly what he just said it was. It's just a man, a computer that is sitting in the middle of your connection. So your connection could be, and I'm getting ready to pull a picture over here for you. Trying to be sneaky and draw it out on a different screen. Let's pull it over here. So this is going to be our computer, and we're actually going to do this in a few. I just want to show you with a little picture. So this is our computer. This is onlinesecurity.com's web server, and I'll explain what a web server is in a second. Just give me 1 second so I can get a nice laptop out here. I want a black laptop. Oh man, messed up. Like this. Here we go. So this is our laptop, right? It's not our laptop though. That's going to be our attacker's laptop, okay? And this chunky guy over here is going to be our victim. All right. And this right here is a web server. This is O-Line Security's web server. What is a web server? A web server is just a server. It's a fat, well, it's not fat anymore. It's just a box that looks like this. It could look like something else too, but it's just a server that has a web application installed on it. So somebody went onto the server, they connected to it, they downloaded a web application, maybe Apache, and they installed it on the web server, on the server. So it turns it into a web server. So you got a web server now. That's all it is. For websites like Facebook and Instagram and online security to be available to us all to access it, they need to be on a web server. Or, they don't need to be on a web server, but most of the times they are on a web server. And the reason I said they don't need to be is because, we got, and I don't want to confuse anybody, there are Lambda functions out there through AWS that create web servers using code. They don't need to be, you don't need this machine anymore. You just create your website from code, scratch. You're just running Lambda functions in AWS and saying, hey, spin up onlinesecurity.com for me. The traditional way is setting up your website on a web server. So the man in the middle attack, let's get my handy dandy tool. We have our victim over here. This victim is just chilling. They're on their network, AKA their router, their Wi-Fi. They connected to their Wi-Fi. They're in the house browsing onlinesecurity.com. But for some reason, they're not using an encrypted router. Their Wi-Fi is not encrypted. So whatever they're connecting to for Wi-Fi has all their information in plain text. I can read it, you can read it. It's not in cursive, it's not confusing or obfuscated. That's a security word, it looks confusing. It's not obfuscated, we can read it. So when this attacker and we'll talk about how they get on the network. When this attacker gets onto your Wi-Fi and you're going to onlinesecurity.com, let's say you're grabbing a file from onlinesecurity.com, you just want to download a file. This attacker can see everything you're doing because they are now a man in the middle. There's a number of ways they can become this man in the middle. And we're going to see one today, and that's called ARP poisoning. So man in the middle is just a category of attacks. There are a few that fall under this category, and one of them is ARP poisoning. And we're going to see that. So before we see it, let me try and talk about it. For this attacker, I'll just say it to me, for me to be able to intercept your traffic going to this web server, I need to do a few things. Nothing happens by magic. I can't just hop on here and start listening to your traffic. When you're at work in a SOC, if you work in a SOC, or if you want to work in a SOC, a security operations center, a lot of times you have alerts configured to look for rogue devices. Like this would be considered a rogue device because one, we don't have its IP address and we don't know its MAC address, hypothetically, okay? We don't know its IP, we don't know its MAC. The IP and MAC are just, they're identifiers for this computer. When this computer connects to your Wi-Fi, it gets a specific IP address. This computer already has a MAC address in the hardware, but we don't have it. We don't know it, it's a rogue device. The reason we have alerts for rogue devices is because we don't want a man in the middle attack to happen. We can set up and I'm jumping ahead. The only reason these attacks work is because there's a router that's supposed to be right here. This router, or we can put a firewall here, or tell the router, hey, if you don't have an IP address that's in this list, we call it a whitelist. If you do not have an or a MAC address and an IP address in this list, you cannot, they cannot use you. Trying to get out of my attitude. There you go. And we're gonna see this. Trust me, I'm like eager to show you right now. Like I want to show you right now, but I just want to talk about it first. The routers don't look like this. This is a pretty ugly router. I'm just using it for now. So this is our router, okay? Maybe it might help to just label some of these things. And if you have any questions, please stop me. Like just stop me and say, hey, stop. Say that again. Slow down. You're getting too excited. Just stop me. So for this, so we know what a man in the middle attack is now. We know it's just this man, this guy right here, chilling in the middle of our connection going from the victim to the web server. The way we connect is through this router. The web server is on the internet. For us to connect to the internet, we need to go through a router. So that's why our traffic is going from, if we type in onlinesecurity.com right here, it gets sent to this router, and the router sends it all to the server. And those of you in the class, the way the router sends it off to the server is with DNS. Remember your DNS servers. So now, and the DNS server is like somewhere hidden back here. Right. So now, that's how the man in the middle attack works. He's just sitting here sniffing the traffic going back and forth. The way he does this is by tricking the router. He has to trick the router and he has to trick the victim. Well, let me slow down. This is for ARP poisoning. Okay, either way, you got to trick both endpoints, this endpoint and that endpoint. But right now, as we're going through this, I'm speaking specifically to ARP poisoning types or kinds of man in the middle attacks. So for this man in the middle attack to work, this type, the attacker has to trick the router, and he has to trick the victim. He has to tell the router that he is the victim, and he has to tell the victim that he is the router. So when he sends data to the attacker, the victim thinks it's the router, but it's really the attacker. And the attacker sends it over to the router and just routes the data over because the router thought they got it from the victim. And when they get the information back from O-line security, let's say they get the what's it called? They get a file back. Let's say they get a file back. Well, I see that file and I send it off to you. Now I'm just sitting here. From this point, imagine what else I could do if the network was not encrypted. Let's put that out there. Imagine what else I could do. You could possibly be logging into that account. I can see your username and password the same way you guys saw it in class, the same way we saw it on a previous Cyber Thursday. We'll see the username and password. I can start building my social engineering profile on you. I see the websites you're going to. I can start studying you and knowing what type of emails I need to make before I send it to you. If I see you're going to a lot of car websites, okay, I know you like cars, or I have a good idea and I think you like cars. Maybe you like to go to a certain Starbucks. So I start hanging around that Starbucks to see if you walk in with your badge from work or you leave your laptop open. I know a guy who got fired because he took and he was a cool guy, bro, like one of the nicest guys you will meet. He had his laptop and he would go to a store, and I'm just gonna leave it at a store. He would go to a store all the time to work there, just where he worked from home. And for some reason, he had his password written on his laptop. I don't know why. To this day, I don't know why. And somebody took his laptop. They took his laptop and they knew what they were doing because they got into his account and sent everybody.
Y'all hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. He sent everybody a phishing email to go back to a bad website. So it had to be somebody who knew who he was, like somebody who was watching him and somebody who needed that information. Like this, it's just weird. Like that just happened to you at the place that you always go to, so you got to be careful. But yeah, if we don't have any questions, we are going to deep dive into this thing now. Get up off of this little sketch pad thing on the bottom. So this right here, y'all, this is an operating system. It's called Kali Linux. It's a Kali Linux operating system. It's a Linux distro. It's a type of Linux operating system. So I'm going to log into it. This is what we are going to use to initiate our man in the middle attack. So let's make sure our victim, we saw the attacker. Let me bring that picture back up. So this attacker is now Kali. This victim is now a Windows server. And for this lab, what do we want to do? We'll leave this as a web server. I'll leave this as a web server. I don't want to get too wild and exotic right now. So, okay. Our Kali machine, our Windows machine, our web server. Let me give you guys a second to digest that while I pull up my big dog over here. All right. Let me see something. Did want to show Fred something. Let me see if I can find it. I got so many things up on my screen over here. I wanted to show Fred something. Fred, I might have to wait till later to show you, but this would have been the perfect time to bring it up. All right, forget it. Okay, let's just get into it. So I'll bring it up later. So you got that picture down. This is Cali. This is our attacker machine, okay? So what I'm gonna do, remember, we are about to initiate a man-in-the-middle attack. Okay, we are about to initiate a man-in-the-middle attack. What type of man-in-the-middle attack? Does anybody remember?
What is it? Was it ARP poison?
Yep. We're going to do an ARP poisoning attack. And the ARP poison is just, let's probably show you that now, right? So let's go to our victim machine. This is our victim. I don't know why she looks like that. Because I blew it up. Hold on. Minimize it. She won't minimize. I gotta stop sharing my screen. She looks so weird. Oh. Not bad, y'all. Give me 1 second to minimize this thing if I can figure it out. Oh, maybe it's because of the WebEx. It's weird, bro. Well, let's do it on this screen. Let me switch screens because I want you guys to see it blown up, not looking all crazy. Wow, and exotic over there. Oh, let's see if it'll share right here. Switch screen. But, that looks better. Can you guys see that? Hopefully you can. This is our victim machine right here. So on our victim machine, so we're doing the ARP poisoning attack, right? So what we are doing is tricking. Can I bring it at the same time? Pull this up. We are tricking this web server, or we're tricking this router that we're the Windows machine, and we're tricking the Windows machine and telling it we're the router. Now, the way we do that trick is in the ARP table. So what we're gonna do, if I type ARP-A in my Windows command shell, it's going to list out my ARP table. My ARP table is pretty much a list of systems that I'm connected to. Obviously, I'm going to be connected to the router. The router is the first IP address here. And then we have the router's MAC address. This is our broadcast address. I'm not going to get into all the details of those, but you have IP address, you have MAC address. You have IP, you have MAC, you have IP, you have MAC. And these say static. Static means the IP address, it's not going to change. The IP is not going to change. It's not talking about the MAC address because the MAC should never change. These should always stay the same. Dynamic, on the other hand, a dynamic IP can change. That means it changes from time to time. The reason we have static and dynamic, typically we use static IPs for systems and devices and servers like web servers that are always going to need that same IP address every time. Like every time you come to my web server, we want to keep this web server's IP address static because we know this web server needs to be available. That's a keyword for Security Plus, availability. It needs to be available. So we give it a static IP address, something that's not going to change. The dynamic IPs can go to mobile devices like your phones, your tablets, your laptops, because those are going to come and go out of the network. They're not always going to be here. These web servers are always going to be on a network. So don't you ever change that, because you could break everything. So aside from that, the ARP table is just a list of systems that are connected to you. The router, it has the IP, and has the MAC. And I want to pay attention to this MAC address right here. This is the router's MAC address right here. And I put that there for a reason. Because, just in case you don't remember what its IP address is, the router is usually going to end in .1. It's like a default, but I'll put it here. So that's the router's MAC address, and that's the router's IP address. Okay, and this is in our Windows ARP table. So now what ARP poisoning does, it tells this Windows box, because remember, we have to confuse the Windows box and we have to confuse the router. ARP poisoning tells the Windows box that, hey, me, the attacker, I'm the router. I'm the router. Look at my IP address. Don't look at the router's IP address. Look at me. I'm the router. Send your traffic to me. So let me pull this up. All right, let me wait for that WebEx thing to go up. All right, man. Make this toolbar. All right, I gotta sneak over there so it doesn't come back up. Ooh. Oh no, it went up. All right, bet. All right. So let's go and get our IP address. I want us to remember this. This is our IP address, right? Let's put it on the Windows machine. I gotta sneak back to it though. Oh man, I love. Oh, I can't win. Yeah. Do it like this, man. I got a toolbar at the top of my screen, and it keeps coming down every time I try to switch between these tabs. So our Cali attacker, this is his IP address. All right. I can get the Cali though. Cali's right there. And his MAC address is, well, we don't really need it right now, but I'll just take it. His MAC address is right here. Copy. Now, is everybody following along with me right now? Like, are we lost anywhere? Because if we are, let me know. I don't mind breaking it down. I actually would love to. But let me know before we move any further.
Wait, so right now you're just taking notes. You said that's the attacker's IP address. That's the attacker's address right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. That's the victim's IP. That's the router IP thing. Okay, I got it.
So they're sharing the same router because they're on the same network. Okay, so think of this router for now, for these purposes, think of this router as your Wi-Fi. Your Wi-Fi is inside of a router. You know, it's really being hosted from a router. So the Kali machine is connected to the same router, and the Windows machine, which isn't here, we're not worried about that. The Windows machine is also connected to this same router right here. Now, the reason I'm taking these notes is because I want you to see, I want it to be written down somewhere where this IP address is 1.92.1.1 with it is lined up with this MAC address. I just want us to see that, so that this is before the ARP poisoning attack. And better yet, I think what would also help is a quick snip.